Hey guys, Dani here. Osa's right here with me, and she's here with me because we had an episode ready to upload today about my first cat, Charlie. But then last night I was watching my episode of The Pit, and there were some ICE agents in this episode. And so I kind of have some thoughts and I want to talk about it. So, Osa, Dani, and you, we're going to talk about it, okay? So, feelings, it caught me off guard. I was not expecting it. I didn't know this was gonna happen. That some characters that were ICE agents were going to show up in the episode. So it caught me off guard, as it always does. I was like, "Ugh." I was like, wait, hold on a second, and then I had to recalibrate, and then I got through the whole episode, and it happened like well into the episode. Like, this wasn't the center problem of the episode, right? And we're also well into the season. So at least I give them that point that they didn't rush it. It didn't happen like earlier in the season. They like took their time and it was well paced and point for them, right? Now, it was weird because and this show thrives on that, and it's a point of pride for the show that how realistic it is, how realistically it depicts an right? That they talk a lot about how out of they came out with this idea because of COVID, right? And this is like a whole tribute to the healthcare workers after COVID. That's what they say about the show, and that's why it's so realistic. And I am a fan of medical dramas, and I have seen many, mostly Grey's Anatomy, and that show Grey's Anatomy takes a lot of like liberty, right? It's not as realistic. And that's kind of one thing that I like about this show, how realistic it is. And I have to say, they have shown like things that are happening that are affecting people real life right now. Like they had a measles case last season. There was a shooting, and that kind of engulfed most of the first season. And right, those are current events that are happening that that affect healthcare workers and people, right? But they had never shown anything that is so sensible, that is so palpable, that is so like out there, that is affecting people, that is hurting people, like ICE agents, and just so nothing so political like that, right? So that was weird, and I think it was in many ways the show is very Chekhovian, and this episode in particular was so Chekhovian. And Anton Chekhov was a Russian playwright that at the beginning of the 20th century, well, he died in 1906, so somewhere in between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, he was making very realistic plays about the fall of the aristocracy and the rise of the middle class, and how people were the unbalance of classes that was happening in Russia back then, and there's probably happening right now, right? Like how people were very poor and suffering from that, and how people were very rich and were suffering from that, right? And we're living their life. But he is known for being so realistic, for showing life as it was, and for never presenting an idea of change, right? He didn't incite anyone to create a revolution, and him, or that's what people think, because his messages in his plays were hidden, were subtle. He didn't loudly incite people for change, for revolution, but he kind of did like pointed out here and there that things were not right, but he would show realism as it was, as life was a mirror in his place, right? um no more to say about that. Mirror is what life was in his show, in his place, I'm sorry. And this episode, of the pit, I think it was very much like that. It was a mirror of life, of how it happens on the episode on the screen, right? The only thing to me that was very unrealistic is the way the ICE officers show up to the hospital. They, spoiler alert, these two officers bring this woman to the hospital because they were doing a sweep in a restaurant and she fell off some stairs, and so she's like, her shoulder is hurt, so they bring her to the hospital to get treated. That I don't think is very realistic. I don't think it happens like that. I think they would detain her, and they would take her to the place where they're going to process her, and that's where a medical a doctor or a nurse would look at this woman, would treat this woman, right? I don't, unless it has happened and I'm just wrong. I don't think that two ICE officers would show up to a hospital with a woman, with a person they just detained, because they're rushing to get to where these people need to get processed so they can like detain them. And there's no. What does happen is that ICE agents will show up to hospitals looking for specific people to detain them, and that has happened, and that's where confrontations in hospitals have happened. And I think that's what they should have done in this episode of The Pit. Like, full on, the officers would have should have just shown up looking for someone, and I think that would have made it even more realistic. But it wasn't like that. They did it this way, where they showed up with this woman, and everything else was so realistic, so realistic. The way they were dressed, the way their face were covering. One of the officers was a person of color, which we see a lot. A lot of these ICE officers are people of color, right? So that's what caught me off guard right away. That's why I was like, oh my god. Something that happens is that Dr. Ravi, Noah Wiley's character, tells his staff that he wants these people out of the hospital as soon as possible because he does not want their presence. And here is what's even more Chekhovian. It's so realistic how they don't, the bureaucracy, how they don't care, they don't like do anything to save this woman from the her fate. You right, they're like, treat her so they can take her away and they can be out of my presence, right? There is no, hey, let's do something so we can save this woman. That's not what his character says, right? And at the end, they're having like issues with technology throughout the season, so everything is very slow, but they rush to get this woman going through x-rays so they can like treat her and get her to go. And at the end, the Robbie snaps at one of the ICE officers and tells him that he has been nothing but a problem for him in his hospital because he is uh you know uh he is a distraction and he is scaring people. So like, a lot of his staff members have left, a lot of people that needed to be treated have left, and so he just doesn't want him there, and that triggers for the officer to go grab this woman to just altogether leave. And so a nurse, Jesse, gets on the way and says, hey, hold on, and they like end up arresting him, right? That is also very realistic, something that we have seen. They end up taking the nurse and they take this woman, and that's where the episode, that's very close to the end of the episode. But yeah, so realistic, so, I say it again, so Chekhovian, so just showing a mirror of life and not showing a way of, of change, no incitement of, hey, let's do something about this, right? And I don't know how to feel about that. I don't know how to feel about that. I ask, why do they show this, right? What is the purpose of having this be a part of an episode of this show, right? I think that I think something important that this episode accomplishes is that it gives visibility to the problem, a problem that is not dead yet, that still happens, that obviously uh, It's been the center of the year all year long. It's what we've been listening to in the news. Having this as a part of a show that is known for its realism helps visibility to the problem. But then what, right? Because again, the episode doesn't incite any change, doesn't let doesn't leave an image of, hey, let's do something about it, oh, to the viewers, right? It's kind of like they're just using it as a part of the show, as a prop of the show, right? And that's what worries me, that this event is just a prop in the show to like make content, to like have people liking the show and not really doing anything. This just grabs on to a real problem that is hurting a lot of people to just be a plot line in this show, right? And that's mostly what worries me. While I do like the visibility that it gives um to the problem, I do wish there would have been more. I do wish they would have done more with it, and maybe this is going to show up in other episodes. I hope it does. They now have to get that nurse out of detention, so maybe there will be a callback to this show, to this problem that they had. But I think a lot of like the realism that is happening in shows and in shows and in movies is just grabbing those problems and making it a prop of their shows, of their movies, right? Something very similar that happened with One Battle After Another, right? Where that was a very immigration was a very central problem of the plot of that movie, right? There is a raid in the middle of that movie that also caught me off guard. I didn't know that was going to happen. And so it clearly is a very political movie. It has very much political messages and meanings, and yet during the press of the movie and during award season, no one made mention of it. No one said, hey, this is a cause that matters to us and that's why we made this movie. They were just there to make money and to make their get their awards, and that's it. And I think that is a problem, where they just use these events that are hurting people as a prop to win awards and make money, right? And I like the Pit very much. So I will keep watching, but I do hope that they do a little more about this, and that this realism that they're using is not just a prop for them to like win awards and to like be right there, right? I think visibility is important to healthcare workers and to the problems that the world is facing right now, but there also has to be a message of what now, right? What do we do? How do we break away from this, right? How do we care for these people that are like actually suffering? Because if you choose to tell these stories, then it's kind of your responsibility to you know to fix the problems, right? Because you chose to talk about this. So those are my thoughts on the episode. I overall did like the episode and the show, and so I'm not mad, but I am hoping to see more about these, because this is now something that they chose to talk about. So it can't be a prop, it cannot be just a storyline in the show, because it's a real life problem that is hurting people, and so it's important to talk about it, and they chose to talk about it. So Danny out, Osa out way before this video was over. She's done with me. So yeah, goodbye.